Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of The Interval with me, Tom Sands. This week I am talking to a very good friend of mine, Nicole Alosinac from Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Nicole is a fabulous luthier. I wanted to get started because I was doing a little bit of research before the interview, and it sounds like you and I have a shared or a very similar backstory when in terms of how we got into lutherie. You know, both started out as cabinet makers, both had very practical grandfathers, and kind of came to lutherie and came to the guitar a little later. For you, I think it was in your early 20s. For me, it was around about the same time. So I want to kind of, we'll get to that in a minute. But I always like to go right back to the beginning. I want to know where you're from. I'm interested in your last name, Alosinac, and where that comes from.
Yeah, it's Croatian. So my it's a very uncommon Croatian last name. It's if you ever meet anybody with that last name, they're directly related to me, pretty much.
Oh wow!
So my dad and his family were from a small town called Osijek, which was just on the Drava, which is like a river, kind of close to, I believe, the Hungarian border. We went there like a long, long time ago, back in the 80s. I think it was like 86, 87. And so I was still pretty young, but it was beautiful. And that's the only time I've been there. But my dad came to Canada, I believe it was like 1960. And he was about 12 when he came over with his family. Yeah.
Wow, and because you're in Vancouver, British Columbia right now. That's where you have your shop.
That's right.
Have you always been in that area?
No, I'm a bit of a transplant. But I've lived in Vancouver now for over 20 years. I guess 21 and a bit. I'm originally from Toronto area. I grew up in Etobicoke by anyone who knows it, Bicentennial Park, it's like this fake like ski hill.
Okay.
Yeah, they made a ski hill out of like garbage landfill. But
oh my god.
Yeah. So that's its
resourceful,
like,
right?
Yeah, that's its claim to fame. But it was great for tobogganing, I'll tell you what. I grew up there.
Why the move to Vancouver?
When I was in I guess I was like 20, and I met a friend, and they were going to work in Banff for the summer. And Banff is in the Canadian Rockies in the province of Alberta. And which is like the neighboring province to BC. BC's on the west coast. I had never been to the mountains, and I was like, oh, that sounds like fun, I'm gonna go. So I went just kind of for a summer job to make money before I went back to school, and I just fell in love with the mountains. I was like, whoa, just the beauty of nature, the trees, the hiking. Most people go there for the skiing or the snowboarding, but I definitely went for the hiking, and then I stayed. Most people just stay for the summer, but I stayed all winter, and I was there on and off for about 2 or 3 years. So I kind of knew that I really loved the beauty and the nature of the West Coast. And when I got out of school I took a 2-year program in woodworking. And when I got out of school, there seemed to be more jobs out in Vancouver at the time. And so I thought that would kind of be fun to explore. I didn't know that I would end up staying here. That just kind of unfolded as time passed. And but I love it out here. And there's things about Toronto that I love more now than when I left. But you know, you can't be everywhere at once, and both places are pretty awesome in their own ways. So yeah, that's how I ended up out here. Yeah.
Okay, so so it sounds like the woodworking had a lot to do with that move as well. You know, with the prospect of work. So getting to the woodworking, when did that start, and how did you first get into woodwork? Tell me about that.
That was such. I feel like my whole path to where I am now in my career and life has been just a series of like serendipitous events. So with woodworking, I was getting out of high school, and I'd always kind of been more on the academic track. I was quite into like math, but I was very much into the arts as well. And so it was kind of weird, like math and arts and, you know, like history and things like that. Whereas science wasn't so much my thing, but I kind of thought I would go to university and study math. And then I thought, okay, well, what do I want to do with that? And you know, the other thing that's funny is I always thought I wanted to wear jeans for the rest of my life. I just love blue jeans. So I'm like, okay, what can I do if I study math and wear jeans? I'm like, I don't know about this. So then I was just thinking it was kind of a weird time in the world. Like it's been a tumultuous, like, you know, half a century. And I thought it would be handy to have a trade. I know it's a long rambling answer, but I thought it would be really handy to have a trade. So I just kind of picked a trade, and I wasn't even thinking about like my family history with woodworking. But for some reason I picked woodworking. And I remember kind of telling some members of my family, and I thought that they would be a little bit disappointed because it wasn't the academic track, and even though that's kind of where I intended to end up. But they were like, oh my gosh, just like your grandfather, and they were so excited, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, because my grandfather was a master woodworker back in Yugoslavia, and made some, you know, beautiful furniture. I have a couple pieces. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of his piees in my
really
home in
nice.
Vancouver. Yeah, and I have some of his tools, which is really cool too.
Wow.
But yeah, so and then I ended up taking this program, which I got in on my marks because I had never taken a shop class before. In high school, never. So the first day I showed up at college, and we were given some drawings, and I was in this expansive shop, I think it's about 50,000 square feet is the shop floor. And they have everything. Like, they have not just a shaper, but they have an overhead shaper and a linear shaper and a rotary shaper, just like everything, you know. And it was interesting because I really didn't know what I was doing. So whereas most of my classmates were like, oh, I got my drawings. Okay, no problem. I'll go over and get my wood and get this and start working on it. Whereas I was literally like tugging on my instructor's coat and saying, okay, like, what do I do? He's like, well, go get your wood. And I'm like, oh, well, where's that? You know, and then, okay, I'm like, I got my wood. Now what do I do? He's like, well, go to the jointer. And I'm like, well, which one's that? You know? And he's like, that machine over there. I'm like, which one? He's like, that one. I'm like, what? Want to show me how to use that? And so
okay.
Yeah, I knew nothing. And I luckily learned quickly, and I had a knack for it, and I also loved it. I did fall in love with working with wood for sure.
Wow.
And
that's incredible. That must have been a real test of character, and a real that must have been hugely daunting. To be like, because had you had any kind of practical had you like seen any of these machines before? Like, did you have a sense of what you were going into?
Yeah, well, I had seen these tools before because my uncle, because he was trained by my grandfather to be a master woodworker, but he's not so much of a hands-on guy. He was definitely more of he's more of a businessman, and he's very smart and astute in that regard. So when he came to Canada, he started up a furniture company. So when I was a kid, I would tag along with my dad, and my dad would go to his shop, which was he built mostly hotel and restaurant furniture. Pardon me for a second.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's Lola.
Hey,
She's
Lola.
just protecting me. She's just protecting me. Yeah. But yeah, so my uncle had this shop. So when I was a kid, I'd go with my dad on the weekend. My dad would probably go to like fix, I don't know, he would like fix some electrical thing or move this or that around. And I'd go with my skateboard and skateboard around this expansive like furniture workshop. So so I'd seen all those tools before, and I also, because I did hang out with my dad as a kid, and he was always kind of like renovating our house or houses. Like I feel like we did about 2 or 3 like home renos together. This one house we did, like we ripped it up to the floorboards, and we're like, redoing stuff like that. So I kind of had hands-on experience with doing renos, and also like watching my dad a lot. Like my dad was a perfectionist, so for the first number of years I was just watching him, and then eventually I was able to do things. And then it was kind of interesting because then eventually there was projects later where it was almost like I was in charge. It kind of came full circle, but it was just a natural evolution. Yeah, it's kind of so. Even though I'd never used those tools, I'd seen them a lot. But I just didn't know exactly what they did. Yeah.
So you felt pretty comfortable out the gate in that environment. No.
I felt comfortable in the environment, but not with the tools. I'm still not a huge fan of the table saw. Just scares me half to death all the time.
As it probably should. I think that's healthy.
Yeah, I use all the jigs, but I've always loved hand tools. I'm such a hand tool junkie. I love my chisels and my rasps and my knives, and I
must say, I've seen a few pictures of your workshop, and I can see all the hand tools behind you, it looks, I can tell you're a hand tool person. They're all beautifully on display, and looks like you got some nice vintage tools there as well.
But I love finding old chisels at like flea markets or garage sales or whatnot. I mean, the steel is just a better quality. It holds the edge better, and it's also fun to kind of repurpose something. I'm a big proponent of like reusing and recycling, and trying not to be wasteful. So that's
definitely
just one of my kind of approaches.
It's always really nice to like the other day I needed a chisel to cut miters in purfling, and I didn't have the exact chisel to do it in one cut, right? So I found I went through my grandfather's old toolbox and found like an old needle file, and it was really nice Sheffield steel, and I took it to the fast grinder and made it into a perfect purfling chisel, and it's still it's kind of like needle file, and then it comes down into a little micro chisel at the end. So I'm a big fan of that as well. So
whatever works.
So you're in shop, you're doing woodworking, you're learning that, and so was that like how long was that program?
It was a 2-year program, it was quite extensive. It was it's one of the, at the time they were saying it was like top 3 in the world, but who knows? I was like, how did I get in? But I got in with my marks, certainly not with my woodworking ability. I did really well at all the theoretical classes, and I also did well at the practical classes. But it was completely new for me. It was just, and I loved it. I was like, oh, like I took it as something that I thought would just be like a backup. Like just, a good kind of plan B, something to fall back on. Like, trades are always in need. And if the world went sideways, I wouldn't get voted off the island, you know. And then I loved it. I found out I really, really enjoyed it. And I had a knack for it, and I had a passion for it. So it was kind of
when you
cool.
know, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's I love that. So you came out of school and then straight into a cabinet maker's workshop. What was the next step for you?
Yeah, I actually bounced around a little bit between Ontario and Alberta and BC for about a year. But most of that time was like just filling in as like a helper in some cabinet making workshops, doing a lot of kitchens, and you know, some fine furniture, but not too much. And then when I came out to BC, I got a job before I even got here and started working right away. And it was at a cabinet making place, and they gave me a lot of opportunities. You know, there's usually like a hierarchy in the shop, as you would probably know, you know, being the lowest on the totem pole. Like initially you're the grunt, so you just move everything around, you know. load these cabinets up on the pallet, and you know, they were just like, oh no, we don't want you as the grunt. And it was kind of funny because there's this story where, like, well, it's true, but it was my second day of my like first proper cabinet making job, and during the interview, my soon-to-be boss, he was French, and his name was Philippe, and he said, you know, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Oh, totally, yeah.
Okay, so he says,
yeah.
I'm a fucking tyrant, is what he tells me in the interview. And, you know, I was young, and, you know, I'd had some jobs where it was just like, no, I can show you. And once you see that I can do this, then you'll change your mind. Mm-hmm. But I've since learned that that's not necessarily how life goes. Right. But, yeah, he was like, you know, I'm a fucking tyrant and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem. And, the second day on the job, he kind of had, a bit of a tantrum. He threw this tantrum and gathered, there was like 3 like kind of bays that were comprised the whole shop. And he gathered everybody, made everybody stop working, like 30 people, to come and remount this one guy who sprayed the glue wrong, right? Just some contact cement. And like I was just sitting there watching it, and I was like, wow, like he is kind of freaking out like a baby, and all these like grown men are just like watching him freak out, and like they're cowering, and I'm like whoa, like you know. And he was like, can anybody show me how to fucking do this, you know? And he's losing it, and I'm just like, and nobody's saying anything. I'm like, wow, if I don't say anything now, I can never say anything. And so I just like, I'm like, I'll show you how to spray the glue. And so I did it, and he was like, that's it. Yes, that's it. That's how you spray the glue. Everybody back to work, you know? And so I was, yeah. And so I was like, oh God, I'm going to get fired. Right. And the next day when I came in the morning, he's like in my office. So I go up to the office, and I'm like, here it comes. Right. You know, like I'm in trouble. Yeah. And he's like, he said, instead, he says, you get a raise. And I was like, oh. And he's like, be happy for one day only. And that's it. You know, but I think because I kind of stepped up to the plate, like literally and figuratively, they kind of gave me more opportunities, and then there were challenges, and I was able to do them. So I kept getting like progressed like through the chain. Like I, you know, within like 2 months, they just handed me a set of plans, and I was like, I had my own bench, and you know, I had an assistant and everything. That's awesome. Which is just like, I feel so fortunate that was my experience, you know. But eventually I did leave that job because of Philippe, because he just made, it wasn't a fun environment to work in. But yeah,
that doesn't sound super healthy and super conducive to a pleasant. You never want to be walking on eggshells around a person who's supposed to be senior to you.
Yeah. Right? And it just seemed to create an environment where, everybody was walking on eggshells. And so, anyways, I feel like I'm rambling, but yeah, that was that.
Oh, no, no, you're fine.
Yeah.
So the guitar, tell me about when the guitar came into your life and the rapid transition, as I'm led to believe, into lutherie.
Yeah, So when we were saying before, when
sure.
That's how it was for me and the guitar. When I was living in Banff, after a while, I started working at the Banff International Hostel, for Hosteling International, and it was a fantastic place to be when you're in your early 20s. People traveling from all around the world, lots of young people. You're out in nature, and I was doing so many just beautiful epic mountain hikes. And anyways, the where the guitar comes into it is that I had these two friends and we just had the same day off. Actually, I should back up. This is actually, if you don't mind, a little bit of a long-winded thing.
Oh please, let's go into the folklore.
So this is very interesting. So I've always loved music, and I used to love to sing, even though I was a terrible singer, and I was quite shy, and I played a bit of piano growing up, but we had an electric piano, so I was able to put on headphones and just play for myself. And as soon as I'd unplug that cord and it was audible to anybody else, I just would shake, and I couldn't do it. I would just get too nervous, and I was really shy as a kid, to an extent. And but I'd always loved music, and I loved to sing. And so I was out in Banff, and there was I'd made friends with this guy who was playing guitar, and on my lunch break, I would meet him on the back deck. He would play some songs, and I would sing along. Which is very kind of him, because I sounded terrible. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this one day we're out there on the back, and this girl walks out, and she's got this crazy guitar that it was just like an old classical that she had painted. On the front, she was a huge Pink Floyd fan, as it turns out, and she'd painted the front with bricks, okay. And it's another brick in the wall. She painted the marching hammers going up the fingerboard. Wow. And on the back, I think it said mother, why did I need to be so high, or something like that, on the back.
Yeah.
And so she walks out with this crazy guitar. I've never met her before. She just sits down and she's like, well, sing this one now. And I was like,
okay.
I'm like, how do you know I'm gonna know it? And she's like, you'll know it. And I can't remember what the song was, but I did know it, and we sang, and then we just became great friends. And for a couple years, so we would sit in her car. She'd be like, let's go for a drive, and we'd go for drives just to drive around and listen to music and sing. And she'd be like, nice. You sing high, I'll sing low, or whatever, right? And we'd do that. And then she was from New Brunswick, east coast of Canada, and then this other and she worked at the hostel, and we just became fast friends. And then another fellow, her name was Tina, and another fellow, Matt, also worked at the hostel, and he was from Australia, from Brisbane. And we became, the three of us became really good friends, and the three of us had the same days off. We worked 4 on, 3 off, and Tina had a car, and we could stay at any hostel in the world for free. So we would just book a hostel somewhere in the mountains, and we'd drive out there, and we'd do these epic hikes, and we'd play guitar. and both of them played guitar, and I would just sing. And then one day Tina was just like, you need to play guitar. Like, you just need to. And she like put it in my lap, and it didn't take. Like, I was like, this is hard, you know? And it's like,
my fingers hurt.
My fingers hurt, exactly, right? And so it didn't take. And then a number of months later, she's like, no, seriously, like, you need to play guitar. And and then I don't know what happened, but I was able to play like 2 or 3 chords, and that was it. I was hooked. I was so hooked. I was playing like 4 hours a day. I was like, and I forced myself because of piano. I'm like, you know, I need to be, because I couldn't sing while I played piano at the same time, and then I couldn't do either of it in front of people. So I'm like, with guitar, I need to sing at the same time as playing, as well as do it in front of people right away. So within a month of playing guitar, and like I said, I was playing 4 hours a day. Sure. I was just like bitten by it. I was like, where have you been my whole life? Like, what? I was so excited about it. Excuse me. I played an open mic like a month in. I knew 2 songs.
Whoa.
And I was just very enthusiastic. I got an encore. I had to play one of the songs again.
Wow. That is quite incredible, really.
Which
so,
again,
like, the guitar,
I think it was just my enthusiasm that sold it. Yeah.
You kind of the guitar enabled you to come out of your shell and perform. That's amazing. Sounds like the guitar was like really important for you.
Oh, I just loved it. But honestly, I think it was the enthusiasm that I had for the instrument that was more entertaining than my actual performance.
So how old are you at this time?
Probably like 21, 22, something like that. Yeah.
Wow, okay. And then so you discover the guitar, you discover that you're completely in love with this instrument. And then you realize that you want to build them. Tell me about the journey into the great shop that is Lutherie guitars.
Oh man. Well, I've definitely told this story before, but it's definitely worth telling. But
please,
I was working as a cabinet maker at a different shop, and they were like, you can make your own hours. Which was fantastic. But what I would do is I'd just stay home and play guitar. So that, I don't know. And this one day I had this guitar that was, it was a man. So like one of the Japanese, it was like a Japanese Martin copy of like an OM. And so, because it was a small body, so I called it my little man. So one day I was at home and I'm playing, and then I was just like, I'm like, little man, you're made of wood. I literally said that to my guitar. I was like, little man, you're made of wood. And then I'm like, I went to school for woodworking. I'm like, if I can't figure out how to make you, then who can, right? And I literally, it was a Thursday. And I put the guitar down and I stood up and I went to the library. I'm kind of dating myself. But so this would have been 1998. And I put the guitar down. I went to the Vancouver library and I started doing a bunch of research on guitar building. And guitar building techniques, which at the time at the library, it was some pretty ancient stuff that I was finding. It's certainly not what we have access to now. And so that was a Thursday, and I was so excited by it. And I left the library and I went to visit my girlfriend at the time, and she was working at a woodworking shop. We had met at woodworking college. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to build guitars. I'm so excited. And like, you know, it was just like, I was on fire with the idea. And her boss said, well, Lutherie is just down the road. You should check out Lutherie. And I was like, Lara what? You know, like I'd never heard of it before. Yeah, and he's like, no, there's this guitar manufacturer just down the road, and it literally was about like 4 blocks from where we were standing. So I'm like, hold on a second. So I went over to Laravé. I walked in the door all like excited, and I was like, can I have a tour? You know, because I just wanted to learn. And they were like, no, we only give tours on Tuesdays or whatever. And I said, oh, okay, I'll come back on Tuesday. And they're like, but we're hiring. And I'm like, oh, hold on. So I go home, I did up my resume, and I went back same day, dropped it off, still the Thursday. And I was just like so excited. Like I was like walking on air. I'm like, I am going to make guitars. I'm like, I am so excited. And the next day, I know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Then the next day, my roommate came home and she's like, hey, you want to come to a party with me tonight? And I was like, oh, okay, sure, let's go. And you know, I was new to town, so I was like, okay, let's, you know, get out and meet people and stuff. The party was being thrown by a guy that worked at Laravé. Like, of all the things, right?
Ding, 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 ding,
like,
ding, ding, ding,
literally,
ding.
yeah, like, and that's what I mean. Like, it was a series of, like, serendipitous events where it's just, like, serious. And so I was just, like, my eyes were, like, just popping out of my head. And so not only did he work at Laravé, but there was, like, 20, 30 other people there that worked at Laravé. So I was like, what do you do there? And how do you do this? And what about this technique? Do you do it like that or whatever? Do you use this tool? And da-da-da-da. Like, you know, because, like, I was just so excited about it. Way more excited than they were at that point in time. And, and then I had an interview on Monday, and, you know, and even during the interview, like, it was kind of funny because the guy, he's like, this is a factory. Like, this is like a factory. Like, he's like, you're a cabinet maker. Like, you're like overqualified to work here. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I just want to work here, you know, like just anything. And, I was like, can I have a tour? You know? And he's like, okay. Mm-hmm. So he gave me a tour of the factory. I was just peppering him with a million questions. And he was just like, I don't know. I don't, like, you know what I mean? I was just asking way too many questions. Cause I was just like, I don't even know. I was on cloud 9 kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And, as we're walking through the factory, I'm like, I would love to do this job. That job looks amazing. And I didn't know it was like a kind of coveted position. But so anyways, he called me up later that day and he's like, well, you know, you can start like anytime you want. And my boss at the cabinet making job, like I had, you know, gone to work on Friday and be like, oh my God, I'm going to make guitars. And, you know, like all excited about it. And I was like telling everybody. And so he was like, well, that's cool. And he's like, okay, like, you know, well, he's like, we're kind of just finishing up this job and we're just about to start the next one. So like, you can go anytime you want. I'm like, okay, I'll see ya. You know, and so I started working at Laravé on the Tuesday.
That's incredible.
And I got to work in the climate room. So I was bracing bodies and assembling bodies like 4 days after I had the idea, or 5 days.
So,
you know?
so was that? So what was the role? Did you have what was your position in the company?
Yeah, I guess I was a bodybuilder. I was a professional bodybuilder.
Right.
Because so I literally would put glue the braces onto the tops and backs. And then we'd have the frames come into the climate room. So things would come into the room and climatize for a couple days, and then we would assemble them. So then I was like, you know, notching, like, you know, lining up the tops and backs and centering them and, you know, fitting them to the frame and gluing them up. And that was my job in the factory when I first started there. Yeah.
And so I'm imagining that you must have moved around different, you know, like you would do the tops and do gluing the bracing for a little bit for like a few months or something, and then you would then go into, okay, now you're going to take care of bending sides for the next 3 months, or like how did that work, and how did you stay? Tell me how that panned out for you.
Well, the way the factory was working at that point in time, because when I worked at Larrivée, that was probably when they were their largest, when they had their most employees. That Larrivée as a company has grown so much and just gone through so many different iterations. So the way the factory worked when I worked there is basically you would do that one process. That was your job. You know what I mean? So right. It's not like it's not like it was an apprenticeship where you would do that for a bit and then go on to something else and go on to something else. Like there was certain positions that involved a little more hand skill or technical knowledge, like neck fitting or final neck fit or, things like that. Versus, body sanding. Body sanding would be, something that people all day long would just sand bodies. Binding would be one thing, and within each department there would be certain more difficult things that, like, I guess more senior people would do, but I got fortunate because I had gone to school for woodworking. One of the courses that I took was shop management. So in shop management you learn how to basically flowchart and streamline a factory and its processes, as well as doing, redesigning things for ergonomics and all that. So when I was there, the person that hired me, who his name is Mark Thibault, he actually left Larrivée and he builds Reiko, like resophonic guitars. Like, so he builds all these resonators, really amazing stuff that he's doing now, which is very cool. And he's also a painter, so he's very much an artist. But he was kind of my direct supervisor, and he started up a quality control team at Larrivée at that point in time. So I feel like I was just kind of in the right place at the right time. And because I had that background, he's like, well, what we should do, because the way that it worked at Larrivée at that point in time is that, we had this jig, this piece of wood, that this is how wide we make the sides. You know what I mean? But that piece of wood had been around for like 20 years. So it was getting pretty rounded and pretty, like, you know what I mean? So it's like, well, how wide do we want the sides? Because we were trying to just kind of streamline the process and make things more consistent. So it's like, let's implement these standards and figure out what measurement we actually want that to be. And so we were doing that process throughout the whole factory. So as being part of that team, I actually got to flowchart the entire process in the factory. I was one of the people that got to do that. There was about 4 or 5 of us that were doing that. And in that process, we also were trying to write the procedure manual for training for every single position in the factory. So because of that, I got to see every process. I got to learn every process, but it's interesting too, because even putting it together, there was very few people who saw like the whole picture of the building of it. But even within that, I still, I don't think there was anyone other than maybe Jean Larrivée himself who really knew the relationships between all those things. Right. That's something that I've kind of discovered more later. But so anyways, I was doing that at the factory, which was an awesome opportunity to just learn so much. And then I kept wanting to improve things. And I started like doing these graphs and showing Jean Larrivée Senior. I'd be like, Jean, look, if we change this process in kerfing, we could save $20,000 a year, right? Because this was all that shop management stuff, right? And he's like, that's nice. He's like, that's nice, Nicole. And then I'm like, okay, wait. I'm like, how about this one? How about this one? If we I'm like, check this out. I'm like, if we do this over here, that's $90,000 a year. You know what I mean? And he's like, and he just like, I get it, because like he is just like, it's his company and he was doing things his way.
Of course, yeah.
So you know what I mean? And here I come, some little excited upstart, and just wanting to like improve things and fix things, and it's just a different mindset. But I think he might have got sick of me being all like, hey, let's do this. And he's like, why don't you like go to the repair department? And the funny thing is, like I said, I'd flowcharted the whole factory, and I'm like, we have a repair department?
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there was actually nobody in it at the time. There was one guy that was doing repairs, but he had been off for a couple months. He was not well. So I was just like, oh, you mean like that mountain of guitars in the middle of the shop floor? I was kind of wondering what that was. So, you know, that's how I started repairing guitars, is they were just like, go fix these. So it was interesting because at the time I was just kind of thrown in there and told to fix them. And they were like guitars that were going through the factory build process and something went wrong, or guitars that people owned and were sending in. But obviously I was more concerned and cautious with people's instruments versus the instruments going through the factory. It's like well, either I kind of can make this work or it gets destroyed, and unfortunately it's a financial loss for the company, but it's not somebody's like baby. You know what I mean? So there was a little less pressure than customers' instruments, you know, like that, you know, because we all form these relationships with our guitars.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I got to experiment a lot, and then I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I don't know what I'm doing at all. Like, you know, I was like, okay, so I got Larrivee. I'm like, can you please buy me like these few books? And then as I was reading the books and like learning about guitar repair, and then I'm like, you know, I get this, I get that, this all makes sense, but there's a couple things here I'm like, I feel like I need some instruction in. And I'm like, can you like find somebody like to teach me how to do this and do that? And so they sent me to one local guitar tech, Paul Iverson, who he's still working, and he's, you know, well known in Vancouver and does good work. And so I learned, he's the one who taught me about fret dressing, which is, you know, and I've kind of morphed it since then, but I mean, he was the start of my fret dressing, and I sure do a lot of fret work. So thank you, Paul. But they also sent me to Geza Burghardt, to learn how to, at the time it was like crack repairs and things like that. And you know, it was another one of those similar things. It's like when Geza and I met, you know, he was just like, he's like, oh, he's like, hello. And I'm like, and I was just like, hi, you know, like he was like, look at your hands. I'm like, look at your hands, you know, like he's like, you know, he was kind of like, look at your eyes. And like, and, you know, right away there was kind of, I just had so much respect for him. Cause if you're not familiar, with Geza, like he is a perfectionist, and he is a true master, you know, like he's got his papers from Europe, and you know, he's just phenomenal, like in his talent and ability. Like I'm still in awe, you know, like he is so talented. And he does everything the old school way, you know what I mean? Like very much so.
So did you, how were you, how long did you spend with him?
With Geza?
Yeah.
I started, while I was still at Larrivee, I just started kind of taking lessons with Geza. Cause he doesn't take apprentices. He just kind of does one-on-one lessons. So I ended up taking lessons with him off and on for like 12 years. But I'd say just as much off as on, you know what I mean? Sure. So even if that was a solid 6 years that I was taking lessons with him, you know, but yeah, it was over quite some time. And so with him, I studied, you know, classical guitar building, and he taught me how to make a lot of my own tools, like a lot of the things you see behind me, you know, this is massively Geza's influence, you know. He, you know, taught me how to make my own tools, my own varnishes. I did French polishing with him, and as well as violin restoration. So I studied that with him as well, and just yeah, like I just can't even tell you how much I learned from him.
So you're getting like a really broad and in-depth insight into the world of stringed instruments and guitar building. Like, it seems like you've kind of touched on so many different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So at what point was it time to kind of set up your own shop?
Well, I wasn't quite there yet. After I left Laravé, I actually went and worked at a music store. And was one of their in-house guitar techs. And so, like at Laravé, I learned so much about the acoustic guitar, and even, you know, ukuleles and mandolins and classical guitars is what Laravé was doing, but mostly the steel string. And then with Geza, I learned more about classical guitars and violins, and the violin family of instruments. And then when I was working at Rufus's guitar shop, it was electric guitars, you know, electronics, air hus, sitars, mandolins, like anything that walked through, banjos. Oh my gosh. I used to get all the banjos because nobody wanted to work on them. And they're like, Nicole, do you want to work on banjos? I'm like, do I? So I mean, I just, honestly, I think I was, at that point in time, I just wanted to learn so much. I was, and I still do. I love learning, and I love problem solving. I love challenges. And I think that's what I really, really enjoy about repairs is there's, even though you could be doing the same procedures, you don't know what's going to arise. Even like the best laid plans, or the, you know, if you've done it 100 times, that 101 time, it's going to be different. And let's face it, even like the 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 10th, you know, 50th, 30th, they're all different. And it's kind of, I guess I just really enjoy that challenge. And I also just really enjoy helping people, and I love music, so I can't help it. You know, with wanting to fix things. So, yeah, but yeah. So
well, it certainly sounds like you've got, again, from the research that I've done, if you're looking for a luthier, or especially if you're looking for a repair person in Vancouver, it seems like you're the person to hit up.
There, you know, I feel like I've been doing it long enough now that I at the very least, if I can't help you, I can tell you I can't help you. But for the most part, I've seen a lot, and I can help a lot of people with their instruments for sure. Yeah. There's so
tell me about the birth of Nicole at Alosinac Lutherie and making it on your own.
Well, Geza, you know, he was always like, he was like Nicole, you know, because he's Hungarian. So he would say, you know, Nicole, you need to put your shingle up, you know, like because he's like, that's what you do. You put your name on something, you hang it outside your door, and you get business. So even though, you know, I was, I had enough confidence to take on the challenges of things, like I just jump into them, and sometimes over my head for sure. I was very slow to be like, I'm going to put my shingle out there, and, you know, and he was always like, just do it. And so when I was working with him, so I was building like a classical guitar, Romanillo's copy. And, you know, I'd gotten a small little space to work, like tiny. It might have been, I don't know, might have been like 200 square feet or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I had enough room for a bench. I had my little edge sander and my drill press and, and my hand tools. And then I just started, and that was when I was working at the guitar shop. And so, you know, I didn't want there to be a conflict of interest when people would walk into the guitar shop and be like, hey, can you fix this for me? Like, you know, I didn't want to be like, hey, here's my card. Like, come bring your repair to me instead. You know? Yeah. But if people ask me about it outside of, where I was working as my day job, I'd be like, absolutely, I can help you. You know, you can bring it to me outside of there. And so I was starting to do some repairs, and then I just thought I'm like, you know, I wanted to be above board. And so I was telling my boss at Rufus's, and because again, like, you know, I was very fortunate. He always treated me well, for sure. And so I wanted to be fair and honest and open with him. And I was like, okay, I just want you to know, I have my own little workshop. I am doing repairs in there, but I'm not taking any repairs from you. You know what I mean? Like, I like, to me, that's a strict line, and I just want you to know that I'm observing that, but I don't want you to hear it from somebody else that this is what I'm doing, you know? Sure. And so, as luck would have it, the next day, Randy Bachman walks into the shop, and he has this like vintage German archtop that he's like, oh, I really like this guitar, but the neck is too skinny. He's like, is there any way to widen the neck? So I think my boss, who owned the store, was kind of like, okay, let's throw Nicole this curveball kind of thing, right? Like, just because widening a neck, right? Like, that's on a vintage instrument. That's like crazy talk, right? So
yeah.
So, you know, he calls me over and he's like, okay, Nicole, meet Randy, Nicole, and you know, like, Nicole, talk to him about this guitar. And he's like, so I want to widen this neck. Is there any way to do it? And I'm like, well, nothing is impossible, but we're gonna like lose the originality and this and that. And like, we talked about things, and I'm like, oh, okay. And again, I think this is where it's like my willingness to just try things and to, whether it's been good or bad for me. I think in this instance, maybe it was good and bad at the same time, because it was definitely a lot of work. But so I ended up taking that repair on, and doing it for Randy kind of through the shop. Like the way we ended up agreeing to sort it out is that I would do it on my own time. I would invoice the owner of the store, and the owner of the store would invoice Randy because he came into the shop. And so it was a crazy thing. What I ended up doing was taking the fingerboard off, cutting the neck in half, and then because it was a laminated neck, and then I made like a wedge for the center strip. So it basically, I was able to widen and taper the neck because it was a straight, skinny one. And then I did a new fingerboard, rebound it, redid the inlay, and resprayed it, and as well as like fixed up the body, and it was missing a pick guard, so I handmade this pick guard for it and rewired it and all this crazy stuff. And the pickup was actually like in the end of the fingerboard, and like, yeah, like inlaid in there. It's I don't know why, I've only ever seen it on the German archtops, but so it was a crazy job, right? And it was not your average repair or modification.
I'm like, when you were saying like widening the neck, I'm like, how would you do that?
Yeah,
on a vintage instrument, that's like, for me, I'd just be like, nah, I don't think so.
Right? And then that's where like the crazy side of me is like, I'm like, that's nuts. Let's do it. You know, like I was just like, okay, let's do it. And, you know, once I kind of advised him that I'm like, you're going to be losing any of the originality and like vintage, you know, blah, blah. And he's like, I want to play this guitar. It's like, okay. Wow. So yeah, so, you know, Randy was like, well, can't I just pay you directly? And I said, look, you walked into his business with your guitar, so this goes to him. I'm like, where you choose to take your next guitar is completely up to you. So then he just started bringing me this stream of like vintage German archtops that I ended up doing like these cockamamie things to, or like recreating, like making this like crazy like twisted rope binding, and like, can you like do this inlay, or like this thing has a hole in it, maybe we can put like an F hole here, you know what I mean? Like, just, it sounds crazy to talk about it. I could show you photos. It looks better than it sounds, but for me,
Wow.
that was such a gift, because that kind of allowed me to make that transition to working on my own. So that's how that ties in, because I was very hesitant to take that step. I was, I guess, kind of risk averse, in being like, oh my gosh, okay, like, can I make a living at this? Can I support myself? Vancouver is not a cheap city, and will I have enough business? And even after being on my own for the first month, and I'm like, oh, okay, I made like this month's rent, and I'm like, what about next month? And I would like just kind of like panic would set in, right? And you're when you start up a shop, you're always having to buy tools. I feel like it's so I kind of started the shop evenings and weekends back in 2003. And then I went full time, like January 1st, 2006. And I feel like I've just, in the last 2 years, have stopped spending every extra penny on tools. Do you know what I mean? Like it's been,
Totally.
It's been that long in building up like the tools, because there's just, and I'm at the point now where it's like, oh, I actually need to start replacing some tools, but, yeah, so it was daunting for me for a while, but having Randy as a steady customer, and he would just bring me these crazy things where he allowed me to experiment, and really allowed me to kind of learn so much through that experimentation. And I felt like, sometimes I felt like a mad scientist, some of the things he would ask me to do. And literally I was just like, well, it's gotta be possible, and at that point in time, I would literally like wake up in the middle of the night and just go, oh, I know, I'm going to clamp it like this. You know what I mean? And it'd just be like, whoa, okay. So I guess my subconscious was working on that problem, I guess that's just how much I like it. I'm always thinking about guitars,
Aren't we all? I think, as luthiers, it's just all guitars all the time. It's just the way it is. I don't think I know of any luthier who is able to not think about guitars. It's so addictive and it's so stimulating.
I know.
And so I wanted to talk to you about because I guess breaking into the boutique building side of things.
Right. Yes. Yeah,
because obviously we met at the Sawmill Festival in Montreal last September, and you had a couple of guitars with you, and you were telling me at the time that you're making more now and wanting to make a name for yourself as a builder too, right?
Yeah, well, when I first had that idea when I was playing my little man, I was like, I wanted to build, that was my, I guess, initial excitement about the trade and the craft, and and I got so into the problem solving side of things and the repairs, and that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, there's tons of problem solving in building as well. It's just different, as I'm sure but yeah, so I mean, all this time had went by, so then I was just, trying to build up the business, because I was always worrying about the next month's rent. And then after a while, I was like, okay, I was worrying about the next 3 months. And then I was worrying about, and just trying to make sure that there was momentum and build. And that, I always thought it was pretty cool that it's like, okay, I'm able to just, go to work for myself. People bring me guitars. I get to work on them all day, and I can make a living. I'm like, that's pretty awesome, and it's kind of funny, because I was talking to somebody recently,
awesome.
And they're like, yeah, and they were like, oh, your business plan. I'm like, I hate to say it, I'm not super business minded, and if I was, maybe I'd be like, doing better financially or whatnot, but really, I've been fortunate enough to kind of just, like, in a way, do what I want. It's like, oh, I want to repair guitars, and people bring them to me. Like, I guess it's not as simple as that, but that's how it feels sometimes, where it's just like, that is pretty awesome. But then in the repair world, when you're in it, like, there's so many guitars out there, and there's so many broken guitars, or just guitars that need setups or help in some way or another. And so if you don't kind of limit the flow, like, it's just never ending. And I kind of got to the point about 5-10 years ago, like, I still always wanted to build, and I thought I would have been building by now, and then it's like, oh, another couple of years went by, I didn't build. I'm like, oh, like 2011, that's the year I'm going to build the first Alosinac model, and then 2011 would go by, I'm like, okay, maybe 2012, and just time was flying. And I just kind of got to a point where I'm like, I just really have an urge to create something, and be creative, and kind of just do my own design and my own experimentation in something that I want to just try, and so I really had to just carve out the time, and then because I'm like, well, nobody's going to give me the time, and I'm not getting any younger, and it's so I just kind of took the time and started designing. I mean, I was always designing in my mind, but actually putting it on paper, which I like drafting. I actually like drawing things out and full-size drawings and just stuff like that. Yeah.
So tell me about the guitars that you're building now.
Well, now I'm building some steel string guitars, flat tops, and my approach to it, kind of like what I'm looking for tonally is I want a small body guitar to have a big sound. I really like to have the full spectrum available. I feel like a lot of new instruments to me are missing the depth of the bass, and this is just a personal preference thing. It's not. I'm not trying to say, everybody has their own idea of what sounds good to them, and and that's why we have so many different guitars, and so many different songs and so many different guitar players, and it's just it's such a personal thing, which is fantastic. But I wanted to build something that had that depth, because I find that when you kind of can feel it in your chest, when you have there's a connection there, and it's inspirational. It's inspiring to have something just resonate with you. But in a small body, you can also, get your arm around it, and it's accessible to people of all heights. Because I find often like a dreadnought shaped guitar or something with that dimensions, I've noticed it starts to get, if you're shorter than 5'9" or 5'10", it can be really hard on people's shoulders to sit down and play it. It's kind of like you have to stand up. But anyway, so I was thinking about that, and I wanted just the full spectrum of sound. I wanted something that would be durable in a repair sense. I can't help but take that out of it.
No, of course. I wanted to say, like, how much of your repair work informs the guitars that you're building.
So much of it, because I've been fortunate to see some outstanding instruments that come through my shop, and every one of those that impressed me in some way or another, I was able to look at, you know what I mean? And kind of try and figure out where that sound was coming from, or what I liked about that build feature, or, I really tried to gather what I think, just my personal take on what I think the best elements of a guitar can be for sound and structure. You know, and then aesthetics is a whole other thing. Because I mean, I find guitars, what separates them from furniture is that, you know, first of all, it's like, yes, it needs to be structurally sound. You know, that has to be solid. And then you actually need it to make a pleasing sound. And then it also needs to look really good. You know, I find those are kind of the three elements. So in each of those elements, you know, like aesthetically, I just want something that's kind of simple and yet elegant is kind of that's my take on it. Again, it's a very personal preference, and
of course,
you know, everybody's got
it's
different
one
styles.
I'm inclined to agree with.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, so, you know, even for years I was trying to think of, okay, I want a headstock shape that's, you know, distinct, yet not just for the purpose of being distinct. You know, I want it to be functional. I want it to be pleasing, yet I don't want it to copy anybody else's, you know? So I was back and forth on headstock shapes. Literally like at least a decade.
I think it's the hardest thing to design. I don't think people quite understand how hard it is to design a headstock.
No, I know. I know, and I actually just last weekend I finally settled on my cutaway design. You know, which again, it's like people are like, "What's so hard?" You know, it seems so simple.
You don't understand.
However, I think, like, you know, the simple things are sometimes the best design. You know, like when you make it look like, oh, that's just how it should be. Then, you know, it resonates with people, and that's usually something that's very simple, but it's not easy to arrive at that, or at least not for me. I mean, I don't really have any design training, you know, so yeah.
One of the things that I really liked about your guitar, along with the simplicity and the elegance of the lines, was how all of the elements on the guitar you were able to tie together, so that there was echoes of each element elsewhere on the instrument. So, you know, the little swoop on the headstock is mirrored at the end of the fingerboard, is mirrored on the heel. And you also had this is the guitar that I saw at Sonor, you know, with the end graph as well. It all all these small little details that in themselves are quite simple. Holistically, they speak of they create a oneness, which I think is really hard to get right, and it's very noticeable on your guitar. So,
thank you. I don't know what it was, but years ago when I was with Geza, and I was making some jigs with him, and this is how in-depth Geza is. He's like, your jig should be beautiful. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I was designing, you know, I was making, what jig would that be? It was basically for cutting the heel of the neck where it meets the sides of the guitar.
Sure.
And so I was building that jig, and he's like, make it beautiful, do something, don't just make it utilitarian, you know. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know what to do. And kind of what I ended up doing was like mirroring the shape of a guitar in like the sides of the jig. And I guess it's kind of hard to imagine, but because it didn't really look like a guitar, but somehow your brain recognized it as that. And to me, that was a real kind of moment that clicked, where it was like, oh, and that's where I kind of got the idea to repeat the same shapes to kind of bring a cohesiveness to it. But ironically, when I was designing my own guitar model, none of those angles are the exact same. They're all slightly different proportions, so that for it to look right, all the angles had to be slightly different as well.
Right.
And that actually was trickier than I thought it would be. And some of it, even with the heel, like that was just a last minute decision. But I'm so glad that it came to me when it did, because I really like it. And, I think maybe other people do too. But, I don't know. I don't know. But the design of it, I feel like I really went into it, I don't have a background in design at all. So I feel like I kind of stumbled across something that I'm very happy with, at the end of the day, and I'm pleased with. And I did talk to a designer friend of mine, because he was kind of giving me the gears about like, who are you to design and I was just kind of like, okay, so what do you think about this? At the end of the day, when I showed him the guitar, he's like, oh, I'm like, do you think I would have passed in design school? And he was like, yeah, I think so. I feel like I got lucky. I just,
I mean, I don't know how much of it is luck. I think it stands to reason that you spent all these years handling other people's guitars, especially on the repair side of things. Right. Looking at guitars that it's not always about objectively and purposefully looking at things.
True.
Often you get a sense, right? You just like, it's like you absorb it via osmosis. You handle enough guitars.
I was gonna say.
It's like, okay, you start to just get an eye. In the same way, I think that, you drink enough wine, you can tell the difference between a Merlot and a Shiraz or whatever, and then you kind of get a sense of, was it a good year or not, and all these different things. So, and I think it's the same with guitars, that we've been to guitar shows. You walk around and you see enough guitars. You go into a room and there's maybe like 100 guitars in there. Some look right and some look not quite right. And you're right. If you're kind of open to that and you're constantly looking, and it's going to feed into your own work, and you're going to develop that kind of palate, and that kind of, your palate. I'm using wine analogies again here, but your palate is going to mature, and it stands to reason that your guitar is going to look right.
When you say like it's something that looks right versus not right, that resonates with me, because there's some things that you can't put your finger on, but you're like, that's just it. And I think for me, the design process, it's doing full-size drawings is how I figure that out, because it's just easier, For me, like when I was designing my cutaway, I kind of had been like, okay, what kind of cutaway do I want? And I'm like, I don't even know. I'm like, I guess I just need to start drawing. And I literally like was just drawing and erasing, and no, I'm going to move that. Okay, no. And then drawing and erasing. And finally I came up with something that I found aesthetically pleasing, But yeah, I guess that's it. It must be through osmosis, because it's not through any training, but I mean, there other aspects of the guitar though, like the construction side of things, are definitely informed from my repair experience, and I can see those connections in the decisions I made. And that's one thing that I found amazing about building versus repairing, is that in the build process, even though I had been designing in my mind for years and years and years, and even though I like actually drew it out on paper, there was still about 1,000 decisions that I didn't foresee in constructing it, and it was like, okay, here we are. We're at this point. Do I do a miter? Do I do a butt joint? Do I, you know what I mean? Just, it's like, okay, like I have to decide right now, and okay, moving on, next, and then another decision that you don't foresee. It was just, I found that, I guess, as coming to a builder later after a number of years repairing, that was the one thing that surprised me more than I think anything else, was just the decisions. And once you decide, it makes everything better, I guess, kind of in life too. But yeah, it's
I was reading. I think it was either it was an interview, or I was listening to. I think you did a podcast with Get Offset.
Yes.
One of the things that you said in that podcast was, when you're on the right path, things are easy. Things just start to kind of make sense, and that's when like flow starts to happen. You're right, and it's I guess there's less resistance, when you're going in the right direction, or it just works. I don't know. I think it's great. No, that all feeds into. Yeah. I think it feeds into the success of an instrument. If you're having to fight it the whole time you're building, or the decisions that you're making don't come particularly easily. I think that you can tell when you see a guitar and at the end of the process. It's like, did that come easily or not? So who knows? Man, I could continue talking for hours, but I know that you've got a business to run, and it's all right for me. I'm at the end of the day. A couple of things that I just wanted to kind of finish up on. What do you have any golden rules in life, in business, or in making that values that you really adhere to and you think are kind of really important, and how do they translate between life and the guitar and everything else? I realise that's quite a deep question.
Yeah. The first kind of things that come to mind are things that really resonate with me are honesty and fairness. And I try to be very transparent in business, in life. Like I'm not the person who's playing two sides of anything. I can't keep it straight, and I don't want to. I just feel like if somebody brings me an instrument, and they're coming to me for help, I will tell them everything I see, you know what I mean? And whether or not, I often get asked, is it worth doing this repair? And it's like, honestly, I can't make that decision for you, but I will tell you all the information you need to make that decision, or if it's like somebody, is interested in one of my guitars, it's like, okay, well, this guitar, this is what I was aiming for, or I don't know, like, it's just, I try to be transparent and fair, in my approaches to most things. I think integrity is important. I'm never trying to just sell somebody something, because I think that first of all, people don't want that, and people can usually see through that. And at the end of the day, if you don't have your morality and if you don't live your values, then what do you have? Like, that's all you really have is your integrity, so I guess I just try and approach things that way, and maybe that's why I'm not good at business, but yeah.
Wow.
But,
no, I think that's probably why you are good at business, and I'm pretty sure that's why you have the reputation that you do, and why your guitars are so pleasing. I'm hoping that I'm hoping that we're going to get to catch up again. Are you going to do Sonar this year?
I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it to Montreal. I'm planning on going to Le Connor in May. Are you going to be there for that?
No, I don't think so. May is a busy month for us, but I did want to ask, where can people find you? Where can people try one of your guitars? Where can people meet you? Where can people find out more about you and what you're about this year?
Well, this year I am planning on going to Le Connor. I don't think there's a Vancouver show. I haven't ruled out Montreal, so Sonar is a possibility. Okay. I'm hoping, I'm building a few more guitars right now that will be available either through my website or eventually through Guitar Gallery Nashville. So, have a look at my website. I am taking orders probably for delivery next year. But I am building a few at the moment that are unspoken for, just to kind of bring to shows or to
do you want to tell us about it? Do you want to tell me about those? What have you got on the bench right now that you're working on? Or is it a secret? Are we not allowed to know?
No, well, I'm still making decisions about a couple of them. I have one flamed walnut guitar it's just a beautiful, gorgeous pattern on this walnut, and with most of my guitars thus far, I've been incorporating brass into them. So this one will also be of that nature. So it will have ebony and brass as the appointments, and the next one that I've just started. I got this insane piece, and I just love wood too. So like I have many sets of guitar backs and sides that I've been air drying for years. I've just gathered bits of wood from here and there, so I'm very excited to build with many of them. But I definitely am building this crazy. It's a bird's eye roasted maple. So it's nice. A dark, kind of like a darker caramel color, and it has a really nice flame through it, and then with just this insane bird's eye. So I'm gonna build that, but because it has that warmth in it, I think the ebony might be too stark with it, so I'm probably gonna go with something in the rosewood family for the appointments with that, and the brass as well. And then I'm unsure the next ones. I'm actually waiting to hear back from the CITES convention in the States and in Canada, whether or not I can build with a few other woods, because there's been some recent changes, and I'm just kind of waiting to hear back from them if stuff I have applies or doesn't. But I've got some nice Madagascar rosewood or even some Honduran rosewood that I'm kind of excited to build with. So we shall see.
Well, I'm really liking the sound of the maple with the rosewood appointments. Oh, Lola.
I know, Lola. Come here, Pop. Yeah, come here. Okay. Thanks for warning me. She's been sick lately, so she's been a little sucky too. So.
Oh, puppy.
She's a sweetie. Yeah.
Maple and rosewood. I'm doing. Yeah, I think that's a good shout. I think that'll look really nice.
Yeah.
Well, listen. It sounds like Lola's saying, "Mummy, come on, we got work to do. Get off the phone."
I think so.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It's been great to catch up.
Well, it's been fantastic to see you again.
Yeah.
Even via Skype.
I know. Well, I'm gonna go in and into the house, and I'm gonna have I'm gonna toast a whiskey to you, and hopefully we can see each other soon and spend ridiculous amounts of money on extremely expensive single malt whiskies. Man, I swear that we were spending more. Oh, sorry. Well, you were spending. I was drinking. more on like a single measure than I would typically spend on a bottle. So
I know
we had some good stuff.
That was some of the best scotch I've ever had, and that's not normally how I roll, but for some reason we were both into it that night, and I don't regret it. You only live once, right?
Oh no, that was certainly a night to remember, and Yeah, all my best lutherie friendships are forged over preposterous amounts of alcohol. So, yeah.
There seems to be a connection.
Oh yeah, totally. All right, well, on that note, I will let you get on with your day. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure for sure.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Interval. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to hit subscribe, give us 5 stars, tell all of your friends, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, over on the website, and on Medium as well.